She pulled off one of the greatest heists in American history, scamming banks out of millions of dollars while pretending to be the illegitimate daughter of one of the most wealthy and powerful men of the Gilded Age. And keep in mind that at this time, women were not allowed to get loans. Spoiler alert, she also inspired the character of Maud Beaton in HBO's The Gilded Age. Cassie Chadwick was born Elizabeth Bigley on October 10, 1857 in Canada, and her father was a railroad section hand. When she was 16, she ran away from home and was arrested while she was trying to get a $250 promissory note from a farmer. In 1878, she was arrested again for trying to use a stolen pocket watch to borrow money. Her father settled that matter, but less than a year later, she was back to her old tricks. She was now presenting herself as a wealthy shipping heiress named Elizabeth Kennard, complete with a forged letter of introduction and a fake check. Somehow she was able to get 10 grand in goods on credit before things fell apart and she had to flee the city. In 1879, she was caught using a calling card that said Miss Bigley, heiress to $15,000 to negotiate forged promissory notes. She was once again arrested and stood trial for forgery. Her lawyer used the insanity defense because she was acting very strange in court and she was found not guilty. After the trial, she was sent to live with her married sister in Cleveland, Ohio. And I might have personally taken jail over having to live in Ohio. No offense. And it wasn't long until Cassie was onto a new scheme. She rented a floor in a house pretending to be a widowed clairvoyant named Madame Lydia de Vere. And to set up her new business, she took out a loan against her sister and brother-in-law's furniture. In 1882, as Madame Lydia, she married Dr. Wallace Springsteen. And after their wedding photo appeared in a newspaper, people started to come out of the woodwork demanding payment for the debts that she ran up with them. Wallace threw her out of the house and after less than a year of marriage filed for divorce. So Cassie went back to being a clairvoyant, this time under the name Madame Marie LaRose. As Madame Marie, she married a farmer named John Scott and convinced him to sign a prenup. After 4 years of living on his farm, she decided that she had enough and filed for divorce. In 1889, she was sentenced to 9.5 years in a Toledo jail for forgery and was paroled in 1893. Back in Cleveland, fresh out of jail, she opened a brothel under the name Cassie Hoover and married her third husband, a wealthy widow, Dr. Leroy Chadwick. She knew that he had recently lost his wife and pretended to be a widow herself who ran a respectable boarding house for women. When Leroy responded saying that he knew it was a brothel, she fainted and told him to take her away from that building immediately. They married in 1897 and he was unaware of her son Emil, who was in the care of another woman. She spent lavishly and relished her role as a respected doctor's wife. However, she was never welcomed by his social circle, who found her to be weird. And she was now about to begin her biggest con yet. On a trip to New York City, she asked a lawyer named Dylan, who was a friend of her husband's, to take her to Andrew Carnegie's home. Her goal was to check credentials, talk to his housekeeper, and scope the place out. After returning to Dylan, she accidentally dropped a $2 million promissory note with Andrew Carnegie's signature. When he picked it up, she revealed her big secret, that she was Carnegie's illegitimate daughter who he showered with money and gifts due to his guilt. She claimed that she was going to inherit $400 million from her father and claimed that she had another $7 million in promissory notes. Once the rumor reached Ohio that Cassie was the daughter of such a powerful and wealthy man, the banks bent over backwards to offer her their services. Over the next 8 years, under the guise of being a Carnegie heir, Cassie swindled the banks out of about $2 million, which is roughly $70 million today. Perfect. Cassie assumed that no one would ask Carnegie about his illegitimate daughter for fear of embarrassment, and the banks wouldn't admit to granting the loans because they were at such a high interest rate that they were pretty much criminal. They also assumed that all of the debts would be paid with Cassie's large inheritance once Carnegie passed. During this time, Cassie lived an extremely lavish lifestyle. She became known as the Queen of Ohio, known for her diamond necklaces and gold organ. But in 1904, her house of cards would come tumbling down. In November of that year, she received a loan for $190,000, which is about $6.6 million today. But this time, the banker looked into her. He found out how many loans she had and got worried, so he called in the repayment of his loan. And of course, Cassie couldn't pay him back, so his bank sued her. It was found that she had enormous debts, and when Carnegie was asked about her, he denied ever knowing her and said that he had not signed a promissory note in over 30 years. She tried to flee to New York, but was promptly arrested, wearing a money belt containing $100,000, and was brought back to Cleveland. Her husband, Leroy, immediately filed for divorce and fled to Europe. The banks of Cleveland were shocked by the news that Cassie was a fraud, and mass panic set in as the banks realized that their debts would not be repaid. One bank even went bankrupt after loaning her over $800,000. Her trial in 1905 was a total media circus, with Andrew Carnegie in attendance to see the woman who used his name to pull off one of the greatest heists in American history. She was sentenced to 14 years in prison and a $70,000 fine, which is about $2.4 million today. She passed away on her 50th birthday in 1907. Andrew Carnegie was so upset that his name was used for fraud that he made a gift to build the Oberon Carnegie Building, which is used by Oberlin College. So what did you think about Cassie's heist?